Welcome to Pathways of Light video series called Holy Spirit, Take the Wheel. This is a video series focused on interviewing Pathways of Light ministers and asking them how they are applying the teachings of A Course in Miracles in their lives. I am your host, Robin Singler, and I am thrilled today to have Mike Atkins with us. Hello, Mike.
Hi, Robin. Very, very pleased to be here with you today.
Thank you. Thank you. It's so nice to be with you. So, as always, I always start with a simple question and then we just let the conversation develop. We do this as a demonstration in part to show that the Holy Spirit is always guiding us and that everything is perfect in truth. So I love starting the interviews in this way and not having a script or an outline. It really helps me stay present and just trust that whatever needs to be shared will be shared. So Mike, Holy Spirit taking the wheel, what does that mean for you? And so to clarify for anybody who isn't familiar with A Course in Miracles, the Holy Spirit is this inner guidance system in our minds that we all have. It isn't something that only some of us have. So asking the Holy Spirit to take the wheel can look at a lot of different ways for us. And I'm interested what that looks like to you on your journey right now, Mike. I know you've been studying A Course in Miracles for quite some time and you've been practicing it. What does that look like? How is that showing up for you in your life?
For me, having Holy Spirit take the wheel really has everything to do with being mentally vigilant. It's being aware of your thoughts instead of just running off on autopilot. And it really is simply a choice between how are you going to approach everything in this world and everything that you're going through. Are you going to do it from a peaceful, loving, helpful perspective? Or are you going to be on that ego autopilot, which is always fear motivated? It's always plotting and planning as a defense to make sure that the future doesn't end up like the past. And so to let the Holy Spirit take the wheel, to me, it means that little willingness to be fully aware of your thoughts, to watch your thoughts, and to not just go on that autopilot where you're just simply reacting to everything. It's being aware enough to pay attention to how you're viewing people and your experiences in your life, and to be willing to let Holy Spirit show you that love or the call for love behind everything. And when I do that, I discover that I am a lot less judgmental, and I'm a lot less defensive, and I'm a lot less fearful. I'm not expecting a negative experience if I'm letting Holy Spirit take the wheel. I'm actually expecting a positive experience. And to me, that's what allows the miracles to come. Which to me, the miracle is the change in your perception that comes when you're willing to practice this forgiveness practice of the course, which basically means letting go of your judgments and interpretations of everything, and being willing to see that love or the call for love. And so it usually comes up for me in little ways. I haven't had a really big, huge drama in my life for a while. I did have my partner pass when I was going through ordination. But ever since then, it's just been little things. So it's just like, when I first moved to this neighborhood, it wasn't really my kind of neighborhood. I prefer to be a little more out in the country, and this is a much more like urban, compact, densely populated area where the neighbors, there's not much of a yard, and the neighbor's house is right there. And I got off on this negative thing because of that. And I started feeling like the people here weren't as nice, and that we were having some problems with like bigotry and stuff like that. And I caught myself, it went on a little bit longer than usual, but I caught myself eventually. And when I caught myself and I started seeing that, these were people just defending themselves, wanting to have the worldly experience that they felt that they could love, and this is why they're reacting negatively, is that they're just really wanting to be happy with the world that they're experiencing. When I had that perception, my perception of this neighborhood changed. All of a sudden, most of the neighbors started being friendly. Um, and even a couple of them started calling me brother, which is a very common experience for me when I'm connected with spirit. I have this experience where all of a sudden everybody will start calling me brother, and that is happening in this neighborhood now. Um, so that was kind of long. I'm going to stop there and and see where that goes.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. Yeah, it's really interesting that as you challenge the thoughts, challenge the judgments, the thoughts that I'm being, from what I'm hearing, and I hear myself in my mind do it all the time. Of course, we are of a shared mind. The Course in Miracles says that you are of one mind, you are not separate. And so to forgive another or to judge another is to judge yourself. Everything that you decide for is really for you. It comes to you because of this unity, this universal oneness. That is the truth behind appearances. So as you're challenging the thought and saying, wait a minute, and spirit gave you another perspective that was more helpful and more forgiving, suddenly what seems to happen out there shifts. I find that very interesting. And there's evidence of that if we pay attention, I feel, all the time. And I have found myself, interestingly, calling people brother. And nobody calls me brother, but I call people brother, and it's like there's like a shift with them. They're not used to that. And I'm a woman seemingly, and I'm calling, hi brother, and I don't know them, they're a stranger. And so it's a really interesting, and it just comes out. I don't plan to do it. I've done it with women and men. So that's interesting that you mentioned that you are receiving that. That's the way in my, the way I kind of look at the world. To me, that's a sign that the mind is changing, that choice for love or that choice for compassion and forgiveness has been made, and now it's being noticed. You're able to see it. I just really I love instances like that because it helps to give us hope, and it's really inspiring and exciting that you've experienced that. And it's something we can all relate to, which is a big part of why we're doing this video series. We want to try to demonstrate for ourselves and others what it actually looks like to study A Course in Miracles. It's such a huge book, right? There's so many pages, and the language can be quite challenging and confusing. And the content is so mind-blowing and so radical that to break it down into what does it actually look like is so helpful. So I so appreciate that.
And I like what you said about the giving and receiving being one, because I think that's a key thing that we're being taught by this practice that the Course in Miracle gives us is in forgiveness. It's teaching us that the world is not happening to us, that the world is a projected image that comes from the thoughts and beliefs that we're holding on to in our mind. And that's why the Course's practice of forgiveness, what it calls true forgiveness, is always the letting go of our judgments and interpretations of everything, because that is where our negative experience of other people and experiences in this world are coming from. It's coming from our own expectations. And it's coming from us looking at that past guilt we feel for thinking that we successfully separated from God. And through that practice of forgiveness, we have those little changes in our perception, our the miracles, that's what a miracle is to me, is the change in your perception of your experience. And by doing that, by practicing the forgiveness and doing that, we get that evidence back that we're doing this to ourselves. That's what proves it to us. And the more we have that experience, the more faith we will have in the truth that we're doing this and that we're all one. And so all that is necessary, just like the manual for teachers tells us, is that the teacher of God accept atonement for themselves. That's all we have to do. And that's why us practicing forgiveness saves the world. That's why the Course tells us we are the saviors of the world, because the world is in our mind and our minds are joined. It's the one mind of God. So if we're just simply willing to practice that forgiveness and we accept atonement for ourselves, we're accepting it for everyone. Um, we become more aware that if it's true for me, it's got to be true for you as well. Because if my change of thought seems to affect the way you're reacting to me, the only way that can be true is if we are joined, if our minds are joined. So I just love that, and I'm complete.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, yeah, so many things are coming to mind, and I just love talking about this. It's so helpful. You're right. That is the evidence. How could that possibly be that I change my mind seemingly sitting alone in my office or in my bed, or, I'm asking for help after having maybe a challenging conversation with a friend or a family member. And I think, I don't want it to be this way. I'm willing to do it differently. Please help me. Going within for the answer to this place of knowing that we are able to access, and yet we have to willingly go there. We have to ask it for help. It won't fight with us. It won't fight with our ego. It won't fight with the personality. It will patiently wait until it's called upon, and then it immediately responds, and it's always trying to help us. It's always trying to speak to us through any symbol in our lives that we relate to, the food or the phone or the weather or whatever it might be, something that you find on the ground, stubbing your toe. It doesn't really matter. Spirit will use anything. And I find that really powerful. And that's where this kind of mystical quality comes in the practice for me, is when I see that what appears to be happening out there is a direct reflection of what I just decided in my mind or what I asked for. And I'm immediately seeing it, especially from a place that is not expected. The story with your neighbors is kind of like that. You're not really expecting a sudden change, and yet a sudden change is there. Suddenly there's a softening, there's a lightening, there's a gentleness where there wasn't before. And that allows me to help continue to let go of my expectations, because expectations are not my friend. They're not my friend. They're not actually going to help me open to a new way. Expectations are based on the past and the future, both of which have nothing to do with this inner guidance system. The inner guidance system there is there for right now, the eternal now that is always present, but it's not going to help me undo the past. Through forgiveness, I can forgive the past, yes, and the past won't be a burden in my mind. I'll be able to see it differently, and I won't have regrets or wish that it were different. But expectations are that. It's a wish for something to be as it is not. And noticing that and getting help and letting go of expectations is can seem really challenging at first, especially. And then realizing that, oh, this expectation actually really caused me a lot of pain because I wanted what I wanted. I'm expecting the world and people to give me what I want, and yet consistently I don't get it. And so what do I do about that? Do I continue down that track, or do I finally give up and say, okay, I'm willing to go within now. I'm willing to let go of this expectation or this goal so that I can see if that might work. And then Spirit proves to us that it does work. So I love that reminder that we do see little bits of proof or evidence that it benefits us to actually surrender to this inner guidance system.
Yeah, and I think that's key. We I think for as long as we're here, we're still going to have some expectations. And, that's part of why we're still here. There's a part of our mind, the Course tells us our mind is split. There's a part of our mind that obviously wants to wake up, or you and I wouldn't be sitting here having this conversation. But there's a part of our mind that is still very, very invested in finding our peace and happiness in the specialness that we can have here. Having something a little bit more, a little bit better, being the best at something. We think there's still that ego part of our mind thinks that our peace and happiness will come from specialness. And so we're not willing to let that go. But the more we recognize that we don't see the forest through the trees, that only the Holy Spirit sees the forest through the trees. And what you just shared comes up a lot when I'm counseling people. They say, I really wanted this to happen and this didn't happen. And I just don't think I can be happy unless it turns out the way I wanted it to. And I try to tell people, it's like, think of how many times throughout your life when you've been going through a tough time, how many times has your ego told you, this is it? This is doom and gloom. You'll never recover from this. You'll never be happy again. And it's like, and has your ego ever been right about that? And hasn't every single time that you've gone through a really tough time in your period, when it's all over and you're on the other side, it's like, as far as I know, in my experience, everybody has the same thought. Like, I wouldn't be where I am today if I wouldn't have gone through that. So I'm actually glad that I went through that. Some people phrase that by saying, what doesn't kill me makes me stronger. You know, um, Everything serves the greater good. And the Holy Spirit sees that. The Holy Spirit can see the forest through the trees. So, in other words, your path may not always go where you think it ought to take you. Holy Spirit, I always, a lot of times when I pray, I'll say this or something better. And that's the acknowledgement that Holy Spirit knows better. And it helps me to accept it when things don't go my way, which still happens, but having that thought that the Holy Spirit sees the forest through the trees, and that everything I've gone through in my life has led me to be the person that I am now. And I'm very grateful in a lot of ways for the person I am right now. My ego still gets down on me sometimes, but I feel like I'm a nice, kind person that has good motives, um, and that I want to help other people. And I think a lot of that comes from the tough experiences I've had in my life. I think that has given me a lot of empathy for other people's struggles. And I have this thing in me where I don't want people to be hurt or to struggle. And I think that motivates me a lot in what I do. Um, and I think people pick up on that. And, when you're talking with somebody that's having a lot of problems, they really don't expect you, and they don't even really want you to solve their problem. They just want to know that you care and that you're there, that they're not alone in this and that somebody cares. And if you can give them that, that helps bring their mind back to peace. And when their mind's back into peace, they will open up to the inspiration, and all of a sudden the solution will come to them. And then they learn the lesson that they don't have to be dependent on outside forces, that the power is within them. Um, and that is a beautiful thing to see, and a wonderful thing to be a part of when that happens.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. Um, it's funny, I don't know if it's going to come up on the video, but there's this thunder and rainstorm happening right now, right outside my window. So I just find that kind of interesting. Um, this idea of letting go of the need to fix or change is part of this, what I would call preferences or expectations. And Jesus tells us in the Course that it is a lack of trust in who you are. And it's that because we've forgotten who we are. We have forgotten our grandeur. We've forgotten that we belong to God. We belong to universal love. we are light. We are love. We are not of this world. We're just having a worldly experience. And that worldly experience is transitory. It's always changing. What is the saying? The only thing you can count on is death and taxes, and even those change. So there's nothing to rest on in truth in our lives. And you see how all of us come to terms and face that at some point. There's the midlife crisis, there's the teenage rebellion. I mean, every part of a human person's life potentially has these series of moments that you realize, oh, I'm not really safe here, am I? What I thought was going to last a long time doesn't last. What I needed, I'm not going to be given. And there's really not much I can do about it. It's a lack of control. And what our scared, false personality self does is try to cling and grab onto control and try to manipulate people and places and things in order to get a sense of safety. But practicing A Course in Miracles and what we're talking about, I think, is the theme of trust and the theme of surrender, which keeps coming up in my life really strongly right now. It's giving up the idea that there's anything here that we can really cling to in our lives. And it can be uncomfortable, but learning over time that it feels so much better just to go within and look for answers there. And you sharing about how we interact with others, oftentimes to join with another person. If somebody's having a difficulty, it's poor you, I'm so sorry. It's coming really from a disempowered place. And I find that really interesting how Jesus talks about that in the Course. He talks about true empathy, which means to not join your brother in his illusions about himself. If he feels weak, if he believes he's limited, if he believes he's doomed or guilty or something about him or her needs to change, that's not a call for us to say, oh, I agree with you. It's a call to step back and let the Holy Spirit speak. And I just really love that example that you talked about of talking about listening to someone who's in trouble and who is in suffering, and instead allowing them to learn their lesson through stepping back and resisting the urge to dispense advice or to jump on the suffering bandwagon. And it can be really challenging. And with my relationships, I don't know if you've experienced this, but you're a minister, but you're also a person. You go to the store and you have family, and we all have relationships that they don't share this teaching. And I find that interesting as well. What do I do when my mom is sick and she's suffering? How can I comfort her in a way that is actually helpful? So I really appreciate you sharing about that. And again, it's about trusting and going within and letting there be a bit of a pause and a silence in the conversation instead of having to sort of fill the air or fill the space right away. There's I've found that, a lot of us, we talk because it's uncomfortable. We say something because we want to fill the space. And yet in that space, just a couple of seconds of just, okay, I'm going to wait. I'm not going to immediately respond to what was just said to me. Something will come. And I get the feeling you have something to share about that would be helpful, because it's another way we all go through this. How do we have more gentle, loving relationships? And it's through getting better at looking and facing challenges and our fearful beliefs.
Yeah, it was just when you said that about how the ego wants to just jump up and immediately say something, I just kind of went like, because that's something that I'm very familiar with, and I call that pressure of speech. You just have this pressure to just get something out, so it's like the ego hates a silent pause. And I think that's deliberate. I think it's because it knows in that silence, when you get quiet, you're open to inspiration, and it doesn't want that. And one of the most important things to remember when you're even with yourself, but especially when we're, as ministers, a lot of people call us and want counseling, and they of course usually want that when they think they're going through a big issue. And one of the biggest things to be aware of, I think, is that all that suffering comes from listening to the ego, because the ego is the part of your mind that believes in your guilt. It believes that you have done this thing, that you have separated, you have destroyed God's perfection, you have kind of in a way killed God, and you just have all this guilt. So the ego is always sending you these messages that, you're bad, you're incapable, you're no good, you're hopeless. And that's what everybody is really dealing with when they're having an issue. What they're really dealing with is this idea that they're not capable of handling it. Like this little situation is going to destroy me, or I'm not going to make the right decision. That's what they find so upsetting. And they're listening to the ego. So the what I tend to share in situations like that is I try to share the unreality of this world. Um, I remind them, it's a lot easier when you're dealing with a course student because you can bring up these concepts. But, I remind them that everything they're seeing here is not real. And that if you look past all the form, you can see that everyone is motivated by the desire to be happy and at peace, and those are just different aspects of love. So it's like everything is the will to love. The only reason it gets messed up and the only reason it sometimes turns to like a negative attack is because we're looking at this dream of form and we think we've got to make choices out of what's going on in this dream world. And in the dream world, it's always duality. There's always something and its opposite. If there's good, there's bad. If there's light, there's dark. There's on, there's off. There's life, there's death. So everything has its opposite. And in this world, we actually believe that's necessary. There's so many people that would say, how would you know something's good if you didn't know what was bad? You have to be able to make that comparison. So the only reason people make these really bizarre choices in this world as to what will bring them happiness, like there's people that decide that attack will bring them happiness, war will bring me happiness, murder will bring me happiness, and, any horrible thing. It's like it's all related to form. So if you can just take the unreality out of it, if you can take the form out of it, you can see that it's really hiding, it's obscuring that will to love. You know, that's what everybody is. That's what everybody is motivated at. The only problem is when we believe this world of form and duality is true, we start believing that we have to choose from this imaginary world. We have to go down the buffet line and pick out the exact right things that will make us happy and reject all the rest, you know, and that's not true. So that's the idea I try to get across to somebody, as opposed to like you were talking about how we have a tendency to go, oh, that's so awful, and isn't that so sad, gosh, wish that didn't happen. All of that is making the illusion real. It's saying you're testifying to the reality of the illusion. So I always try to counsel people without saying anything that makes the illusion real, and reminding them that it's only because you're believing that the illusion is real that you think there are these awful choices in front of you right now, or you think that was an awful experience. And it's surprising how often that helps. Complete. Mhm.
You're right. And we can't really get any lasting relief without stepping back. That is pausing and stepping back in the mind. In the mind, just to say, I think of like a map too. I call it zooming out. Zooming out, get above it a little, or it's just a step, just a little tiny baby step in the mind. That is all that's required of us, actually. There isn't much we need to do, but step back and ask this inner guidance system in our mind for help and just admit that we need help. It's really very simple. And yet these fearful beliefs just keep coming up. And so what you started the conversation with is vigilance.
Mhm.
So I'm coming back around to vigilance. That's just working on that, just working on being willing more consistently. Just working on consistency is huge, and it pays us huge dividends in being able to release ourselves from situations that would normally cause us suffering, and to be of help to others and to provide real comfort. What's another big theme for me is just showing up more fully in my relationships and seeing how I've, out of fear and from this, what I suspect is just a deep unworthiness that still is asking to be healed through my relationships. I have a tendency to like close off and avoid and just kind of do my own thing and tell myself, well, this is how I am. I used to say, I'm a loner. And it's so funny that I'm way more talkative now than I ever used to be. I never used to talk to people. I was just, I've changed a lot in my life. And it's because of this practice. I can be in a room full of people and go up to a stranger now and have a conversation. And it feels like an adventure. I'm not sweating bullets. There might be a little bit of trepidation, but I go do it anyway. And there's always an interesting surprise or some kind of message or some kind of learning that comes from it. And it's just really beautiful, all of the ways that spirit helps us really be of service to others and how valuable that really is to be able to sit with somebody in their time of discomfort and not try to fix. As you mentioned, it doesn't really feel good to be told you shouldn't feel the way you feel. That does not feel good. It's not empowering. It's quite enraging, if you ask me. In my past, really, most of my life, I've had this depression that I've had to face and deal with, and it can get quite extreme. And over the years, of course, it's lightened. But when I was struggling and I would go to talk to somebody and kind of, okay, I'm going to talk, I'm going to be real about this. I can't hide this anymore. I'm done suffering by myself. I would talk to somebody, and some people would try to just talk me out of it. And it would just make it worse, frankly. It's just like, now I'm really not supposed to feel this way. I already feel like an alien, like I'm not supposed to feel this way. And now I'm being told, but you have a great life and you shouldn't feel that way. And look on the bright side. And it's like, there is no bright side. That's why I feel this way. Because that's where my mind was at.
Mhm.
So I know from personal experience that's not empowering. It's confusing to be told that you're not supposed to be where you're at. So I really appreciate you bringing that forward. And I'm learning how to be with these hurt parts. You call it people call it healing inner child. Of course, Pathways has the healing inner child program, and that is very, very popular and very helpful in just looking within at these parts within us that are hurt and that are calling for help, and actually learning how to be that help, how to provide that care and that support with the help of the Holy Spirit or our inner guidance to help us embrace the suffering instead of pushing it away, because pushing it away is a rejection and it's abandonment. And so I've really been looking at that and finding that to be, wow, what a deep practice to step into through the spiritual journey is to show up for people and let them be where they're at. And that is so helpful and it's so loving. And that's what the spirit does with us. When we go within and I hear a nasty judgmental voice or some kind of ultimatum or something like that, I know that I'm hearing the ego. I haven't been still long enough. The ego is blabbering on, trying to disguise itself as my guidance system. So then I just wait and pause and say, no, I'm going to hold on, spirit. I'm going to hold on the line for you. I want to talk to you. And it will eventually come. The guidance in our minds that loves us will never hurt us. It will never berate us. It will never threaten us. Now, it will tell us things we don't want to hear at times, but it will never do so in a cruel way. And the spirit knows what we're ready for. And the spirit's goal is to always reduce fear, always to get us to feel comforted in a real way. And as we practice and learn, as you're saying, when we fill the space immediately, often that can be egoic and we won't be helpful. But I just really love this time that I'm experiencing in my relationships of just learning, really practicing more consistently how to really show up and show up for myself and look at these parts that are crying for help and love, and that I've wanted to just kind of get rid of it or bury it or yell at it and say you shouldn't be there. That's all changing now, and it's just really inspiring and heartwarming.
Yeah, and everything you just shared, it reminds me of what the Course tells us, how the Holy Spirit's approach to all this. The Holy Spirit in the Course tells us that he works with us where we are and that he will honor everything that we made, but he won't uphold it. And I think that's what you were just talking about, where, that upholding it would be oh, I'm so sorry, and that is so awful. It's the upholding it would be making the illusion true, but he honors it. In other words, he works with it. And another thing in the Course, it says all things are lessons God would have me learn. Well, that's how Holy Spirit repurposes everything that we've made here. He honors it. He doesn't ever berate us, doesn't ever say anything like, well, you need to cut that out, or you really shouldn't do that. Never ever says anything like that. Just always guides you to a new perception. And I love the fact that you talked about how to avoid that temptation to just jump in there and go after it yourself, that it takes that pause. I really think that's part of the little willingness. It's like, because the Course tells us again that the ego always speaks first and speaks loudest. So usually that first initial instinctive response is usually the ego. And it usually is something like, I've got to go after this problem. I've got to fix it. I've got to change it. And that's why it's so important to take that little pause, just that little moment of, don't let me jump out ahead of spirit. Let me just go to peace for a moment here and give him an opportunity to give me a new insight into this. And it's amazing how that all works. And I also love what you said about being introverted, because for the majority of my life, I was very introverted in my spiritual practice, because I got it in my head at a very early age that the whole problem was listening to what other people told me things like the Bible were saying. And so I got it in my head like I had to stop listening to other people tell me what all this stuff meant. I needed to study it completely on my own without anybody telling me what it meant. And so, for decades, I started when I was a kid. I didn't want to join with anybody else because my ego was looking at like almost everybody else on the planet as the problem, that they were going to jump up and tell me what God was and what God wanted me to do and who the sinners were and who the good guys were. And I just didn't want any part of that. Well, I got some really fine intellectual insights and everything, but I wasn't really getting any better. I was still reacting to the world from an ego standpoint. And it took me a long time to get to the point where it's like, what's missing? It's joining with other people and letting other people talk and letting other people share their experiences. It's like, that's not a bad thing. Even if I think that they're, like, oh, that's not the right interpretation, it's always very helpful to listen to other people and find out where they are. Because then you can see their journey, you can see their path, and you see that everybody's path is kind of a little bit different, because Holy Spirit is working with everybody where they are and honoring what they made. So not everyone's path is exactly the same, step by step, but it's all going to the same place. It's all returning us to the truth, returning us to peace. And Holy Spirit's just working with everybody where they are. And when we join with everybody else, we get a much more clearer awareness of that. And that's what allows us to develop that trust in the Holy Spirit and the truth. You can see that everyone's being guided, and that it doesn't matter what anybody's got wrong, or how bad off they are, or how far behind our ego wants to say they are. Holy Spirit's got them, and his Holy Spirit is bringing them along. No matter how much resistance they're having, Holy Spirit is still working with them and still bringing them along. And that really helps me to have a lot of trust, and it really helps me to be at peace with this whole journey, because that little insight is what has got me to the point where I no longer look at this world and go, oh my God, it's just so crazy and hopeless. There's no hope, which I used to do a lot when I'd look at the news and look at politics and, you know, different people around the globe hating different people because they're different. Um, I used to just let that stuff tell me it's hopeless. And now I recognize that it's not, that Holy Spirit knows exactly how to meet all those people where they are without telling them that they're doing it wrong, and still bring them back into the unity of God's love, still bring them back to the peace, and is slowly bringing them to let go of all these hatreds and resentments, and this idea that the world is wrong and we got to fix this world before we can get back to heaven. Um, I I just am really grateful for Holy Spirit's guidance, and that gratitude and the experience of seeing that Holy Spirit has always guided me to the right path, despite what my ego is trying to tell me, like my ego trying to tell me to do it all on my own. Just the fact that I was willing for that spiritual awakening, that's all that really mattered. Holy Spirit worked with me every step of the way. And when I was ready to let go of that idea of that I had to do it on my own, Holy Spirit said, great, here's an experience that will help you do that. And I think that's what a lot of my ordination was, and doing these groups and starting to counsel other people. When I first started doing that, my ego used to tell me, who are you? You're not qualified to do this. Um, and I realized it wasn't what my ego thought it was, that it was a simple joining, and the willingness to join with other people in peace and with respect. Um, that was all I really needed to do to let these insights come, and to be able to recognize that we are all literally healing together. There is nobody that's further behind or farther ahead. That's just part of the illusion. We're all one mind. And when we're ready to accept this stuff, Holy Spirit will, bring me to somebody that I think is farther ahead, that will share their insights with me. And then we'll both move along, and then we'll meet other people and we'll all move along together. And the group just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And eventually it reaches past that halfway point, and we suddenly carry everybody over the rainbow bridge together.
Yay! Yeah, so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Um, and that actually is a great segue into the last little piece I'd like to explore with you before we close our interview today. Um, is your involvement with the Listen and Receive support group. So you have been helping to host that for quite some time now. For those who may not be aware, Pathways of Light has a 30-day Listen and Receive program designed to help you get in touch with the Holy Spirit, with your inner guidance, with your helpful self, your intuition, whatever you'd like to. They're all the same. They're just different terms. And Mike's been involved with a weekly group with that theme. It's a teleconference, and I've been on the telecon whenever I can. I get on the teleconference, and it's always so helpful. Whether I share or not, it's so helpful to hear just what's going on with somebody that day and how they're applying things and what they're struggling with. there can be some really deep shares when we do these phone calls and these Zoom sessions. You also do a Zoom study group, as I do. It has been so key in my learning. I need those Zooms. I'm not giving, they're always for me. And so what these services that we seem to do to help others is really just for ourselves. So I wanted to just open it up to see if there's anything you want to share about your experience with Listen and Receive. um, as my role here at the Pathways of Light office, I answer the phone and I answer emails, and I am constantly telling people, if you have a chance, just dial in. You don't have to talk. You can just listen. There's no pressure to participate verbally in any way. You don't have to buy anything. You don't even have to be a Course in Miracles student. So, and you don't have to be a Listen and Receive program student. You just call and see if it's helpful. And so what's been your experience, Mike, with that? And is there anything you feel guided to share about that?
I got involved with that program because I started going to the Listen and Receive call before I was a minister. I had reached out. I was looking for a spiritual counselor because at that point, I was going through my partner of 30 years was terminal and was in the process of passing, and I was having a difficult time with that. And my ego was telling me it was the dark night of the soul. That I was going through one of those dark night of the souls, and so I was looking for a spiritual counselor, and I got up on the Pathways of Light website and just started looking at the ministers, and I came across the profile for Barbara Siegel, and she was the minister that was actually hosting that call at the time. And I reached out to her to be my counselor and found out she was hosting that call. And I got the program and I started going through the call. And that program, that 30-day program, uh, was really it was the biggest thing that helped me get over that upset and over that doom and gloom. I had also thought at that time that I had lost the voice of the Holy Spirit. I used to feel very, very guided, very, very in touch. I used to just talk with God throughout the day, just like I was talking with a friend. And when this was going on, I felt like I lost that I couldn't hear that voice anymore. And that's part of why I got into the program. And in that program, it's a lesson every day. It's a 30-day program, and there's a lesson every day. And the lessons are very brief, but it sets up a practice for that day. And part of that practice was in the morning and evening, you tune in and listen to the guidance, and you write down your insights that come in those morning and evening practices. And doing that practice is what at the time I felt that's what brought back my connection to Holy Spirit. So then I found out that Barbara was leaving the call, and I just had this thing like, oh, this is too helpful. It can't go away. And so that's why I offered to take it over. And so I took it over, and that was I believe I took it over in December of 2019. And I've been with it ever since. I've sometimes done it on my own, but I had a few people help me. And right now, for I think it's been at least 2 years now, Reverend Bill Poppy is doing it with me. And Bill is wonderful. You've interviewed him for this series. He has great insights. He has a lot to share because he's been through a lot in his life, and he's going through a lot in his life. And the things that come up for him seem pretty dramatic, and Bill just goes through them so beautifully. He is so connected. He's so calm about all this stuff. So he's just a wonderful person to do this call with. And like you said, it's a very, very, the people on that call are like family. More than half the people on the call are like regulars that are there all the time. And then there's other people that are kind of like, they're semi-regulars. They don't make it every week, but they come when they can. And so everybody on that call feels very safe. So they're very comfortable sharing. And a lot of that sharing comes up, and that is so helpful when other people are sharing. Those personal stories that people share, the personal miracle stories, I think are the most helpful thing. We do a discussion, we do a meditation, we share prayers. Those are wonderful. Those are nice little peaceful things. The discussion has some good insights in it. But what really gets people's attention and what really stimulates the conversation and gets other people realizing that they have their own miracle stories is when people are sharing those personal stories, because it gives people hope. It lets them know that they're not alone. It lets them know that it's normal to have issues, to have problems, to not be perfect all the time. So all of a sudden it takes everybody off their pedestal and they realize they're just like everybody else, you know, and so they're just, Holy Spirit is helping them just like they're helping these other people. It's not some unattainable goal. These people are not some form of perfection that's untouchable and unreachable. It's just so helpful. And if you actually do that program, if you feel like you're wanting to develop and strengthen your connection to Holy Spirit, just that daily practice of, once in the morning and once in the evening, sitting there quietly, letting insight come and writing it down is very helpful. And I think part of that reason is I think everybody is getting insight and inspiration all the time. But one of the ego's favorite tricks to pull on us is to make us almost instantly forget it. So I think that process of writing it down is very, very helpful. And I can tell you, I've gone back and read stuff that I wrote down and have been like, whoa, that's not me. That's too deep. That's too helpful. That did not come from me. Um, and everybody that does that has that experience. It's like, I can't believe I wrote that. And that proves to them that spirit is talking through them. And then that also helps them to see that spirit is speaking through everyone. And then that insight helps them to realize, I guess it's true. We are really one. We're all sharing the one mind. So that's why I'm doing the program, because I believe in it. I think it's helpful. And the reason I'm still doing it is because I have all these positive experiences and it's still helpful. And just like you say, when I'm responding to someone's heartfelt question on that call, every time I get about a quarter of the way into my response, and suddenly I'm aware that spirit is talking to me about a situation I'm going through right in that moment, and it's something that I forgot, it makes me aware of, oh, you lost your mental vigilance, you weren't being forgiven, you just got all wrapped up in the negativity and you're just responding to this negatively. So it's always for me. And that also helps me to realize that we're all one and we're all healing together as well. So again, it's back to that joining. That joining is where the experience comes that proves it to you. If you're just reading books all by yourself and just letting the insights come, that's fine for helping you to develop your faith in the truth, but it's not really going to bring you the experience of healing like it does when we join with others in that way. And so that's a big part of the reason why I do these calls and why I'm still doing them, because those calls, the Sunday call, the Tuesday call, and the Wednesday call, that's where my biggest healing comes, even if I don't say a word on those calls. Just the listening is so helpful. And I'm complete.
Yeah, thank you. I'm so glad we were able to speak to that. And I can't say how much of a speed up it's been for me. And just as you know, we've already talked about, you're always getting we're always getting what we need if we're just open to it, if we're just willing to let go of our expectations a little bit, willing to be a little clueless. In other words, willing to say, okay, spirit, maybe you know more about this than I do.
Mhm.
A little bit of humility,
Mhm.
and it gets proven over and over in ways that make sense to us that,
Mhm.
oh, maybe there is really something else going on here. Maybe I've been wrong about myself. Maybe I don't have to be perfect. Maybe I can just show up
Mhm.
and be authentic and real, and I will be loved and accepted and supported, and I can actually help others in doing that. Wow. That's not what the ego tells me. The ego tells me the opposite. So it's such a beautiful way to let ourselves be undone very gently, let ourselves be helped so gently. And it's just been wonderful to talk about all of this with you, Mike. I'm so
Mhm,
glad to join with you today. I'm
mhm,
so appreciative to you for your consistency and
mhm,
for all of the ways that you volunteer your time. I
mhm.
know you know that it's for you, but you still do it. And
Mhm.
those little steps are important for all of us. So I really
Mhm.
appreciate what you offer to all of us. And thank you so much for sharing of yourself today. Is there anything else you'd like to say in closing before we end our time?
Well, I just want to say how much I appreciate Pathways of Light and everything they do. How much I appreciate you because I know that you have volunteered. You're actually at the Pathways of Light headquarters, and you're helping Mary and Robert. Um, they're slowing down, and they can't do everything they used to do, and you're really helping with all that stuff, and you're handling, the minutia, the details, and the drudgery of responding to all the emails and all the phone calls that come in, and you're keeping it going. And I just really, really appreciate Pathways of Light's approach, because even among Course in Miracles students, everybody has a slightly different interpretation. And I've been in a couple other Course in Miracles groups, and the thing I like about Pathways of Light is their total non-judgmental approach. They really do accept everybody where they are. I have never heard Robert or Mary tell anybody, "Oh no, no, that's wrong. You must see it this way." Um, and I really like the way that they're so open. They accept everyone. They make sure that people that can't afford the help still get the help. I've never seen them turn a single person away for anything, regardless of how much or how little they were able to, contribute. Um, they're just real. Uh, they're honest, they're real, and they're in it for the right reasons. They're in it to help. And they have helped so many people. I can't tell you how many people have come to me through the counseling and have talked about how grateful they are for Pathways of Light. And you just don't hear that about, you know, even regular churches and everything. You very rarely hear people talk about how much that church actually helped them. And you hear it all the time with Pathways of Light, how much they really help. And so I'm just really grateful that I can be a part of the organization and promote these wonderful programs like the Listen and Receive program that do actually help. Um, and Gosh, I can't think of anything else. I'm very happy to be where I am and to be able to have this opportunity to help. I just feel very blessed and I feel very guided that this is where I am right now. And regardless of how many times my ego tells me this is it, it's doom and gloom. It's like, here I am, and everything is great, and I'm surrounded by wonderful people. And we all love each other, and we're all supporting each other, and we're all pulling for each other. Um, and nothing can ever take that away, no matter what's going on. And I'm just very grateful, and I'm complete.
Oh, thank you. Yes. Yeah, what a beautiful place to end, and just the awareness of everything there is to be grateful for, and how just the attitude of gratitude helps to clear the mind of doubt, clear the mind of remorse or the need to fix or change ourselves or anyone else. We are perfect as God created us. God created us as one with Him. God is simply love that extends forever. It never ends, and it is all encompassing. It excludes no one and nothing. And that is who we are in truth. And so to be led to that awareness by joining with others and learning that we can be helpful in the process is so beautiful. And just to remember all the little things that we're grateful for and that we're blessed by. So thank you so much for ending us on that note, because it truly is the gateway to a new way of seeing things. When we are grateful, we allow help and light and love to come into our minds and to warm us and comfort us and soothe us. And then we can give that to others. And there really is no greater joy in our lives than being an active part of that process. So thank you so much. Thank you, Holy Spirit, for taking the wheel for us today.
Yay. Well, thank you, Robin. Those were beautiful thoughts to close the call with. So thank you for that.
You're
Mhm.
so welcome. And I love the idea. I feel like that passenger seat with the top down, and my inner guidance is in the driver's seat. He's got the map. I'm not looking at the speedometer, the odometer. I'm not looking at anything. I'm just along for the ride and enjoying the relaxed state of trust. So thank you. I'm very
The
grateful.
beautiful scenery and the fresh air.
That's right. Whoosh. Yes, that's where we belong. So blessings. Thank you so much. And thank you for tuning in. And we'll see you again soon.